While I set the table, Dad filmed me and posted, "Our live-in maid, at least she's good for something." My sister commented a laughing emoji. I left without saying a word. The next morning she texted, "Why's my card declined?" Without thinking twice, I was halfway through arranging the Christmas plates when my dad walked in with his phone out. I thought he was filming the food. The turkey I roasted for 2 hours, the sweet potato casserole, the stuffing I made from scratch because my sister insists the boxed kind is depressing, the cookies shaped like reindeer I decorated after midnight while babysitting her toddler. It was my 6th Christmas doing everything while everyone else did nothing. He pointed the camera at me and said loud and proud, "Our live-in maid, at least she's good for something." Then he laughed. I don't think I'll ever forget that sound. Or how casually he said it, like it was some inside joke between him and his Facebook friends. Like that's all I was to him. A joke. Not his daughter. Not a person. Just a servant he didn't have to pay. A minute later my phone buzzed. I checked it and saw the video posted with that same caption, word for word. My sister had already commented. Just a laughing emoji. Not a single person asked me how long I'd been on my feet. Or why I was even here, living in a house where I had to share a room with my sister's kids while they got the guest suite. I was 22, scraping by with a part-time job and trying to save up to get out. But half my paycheck went toward bills that didn't have my name on them. Gas, water, groceries, their Netflix subscription. Not one of them ever said thank you. They just said, "Michelle, could you do this? Could you watch the kids while we're gone? Could you make something nice for dinner?" My sister and her husband had gone on 2 vacations this year alone. I hadn't left the county. I didn't say anything. I didn't throw a fit or ask them why they thought it was okay. I walked upstairs, packed everything I could into one suitcase. Just one. Because I didn't want to take anything they might claim was theirs. I left the room how I found it. The toddler had drawn on the wall with crayon. I didn't clean it. I didn't even turn off the lights. Nobody noticed me walking out. It was snowing by the time I reached the highway. I didn't have a plan. I just drove. I had $380 in my account and nowhere to go. But my grandparents lived 2 hours away and they were supposed to spend Christmas at our house. Maybe they hadn't left yet. Maybe they wouldn't mind. When I knocked on the door and Grandma opened it, she looked at the suitcase, then at my face. And that was it. No questions. She stepped back and told me to come in. Grandpa was watching something in the living room. He muted the TV the moment he saw me. I could tell he knew something was wrong. Maybe he'd known for a while. I told them everything. Not all at once, but enough. The way I was treated like a full-time babysitter while everyone else took breaks. How I was expected to cook, clean, pay bills and never complain. How even my sister's husband left me notes like, "Please don't forget to do the dishes." Like I was their employee. How my mom called it pulling my weight, and my dad called it growing up. And how I told myself it was temporary just until I could afford rent again. But somehow 6 months passed and nothing changed, except that now apparently I was the family joke. Grandma didn't even hesitate. She picked up the phone, called my mom and said, "We're staying here this year. With Michelle." Then she hung up. No explanation. No debate. An hour later my uncle called. I hadn't told him anything, but I guess word spread fast. He said, "We're not going to your parents. We're coming to Grandma's. Michelle, I'm proud of you." That night, I sat on the floor between my cousins eating slices of pie they'd brought with them. Grandpa played old Christmas music on the record player. Someone made hot cocoa. No one asked me to do anything. They just talked to me like I mattered. Like I belonged. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with Christmas group texts from the other house. I didn't open any of them. The next morning, I was halfway through pouring coffee when my phone lit up again. A text from my sister. "Why's my card declined?" I didn't even have to think. I texted back. "Try using your own money for once." After I sent the text, I put my phone face down on the counter and didn't touch it for hours. It wasn't about revenge, I just needed the noise to stop. For the first time in months, I felt air that didn't taste like tension. Grandma made pancakes for breakfast. Grandpa was humming some old country tune while reading the paper, and the house felt safe. I didn't realize how much I'd been running on autopilot until that morning. I'd been living half a life back at my parents' place. Working, cleaning, cooking, existing but not living. Every day was the same routine of being useful to everyone but myself. And the worst part was they'd made me believe that was normal. Around noon, Grandma asked if I'd like to go with her and Grandpa to the market. I said sure, and we spent 2 hours walking around the little local stalls, picking out pies and fruit. No one called me lazy. No one handed me someone else's mess to clean up. It was ordinary, but it felt like the most peaceful day I'd had in years. When we got back, I finally turned my phone on. 12 missed calls. 4 texts from my sister. 2 from my mom. 1 from my dad. The newest message said, "You think you can just disappear? We're not made of money, Michelle. You could have at least told us you canceled the card. That made me laugh. A real laugh, not the kind you fake to keep the peace. Because I hadn't canceled their card. I just stopped linking my account to it. I'd been planning that for weeks. They thought I was still paying for utilities, the kids' streaming apps, and even their vacation flights. But a few days before Christmas, I'd moved everything into my own name and opened a new account. The only thing I left behind was the silence of me no longer paying for them. That night, we watched It's a Wonderful Life on Grandpa's old DVD player. Halfway through, Grandma's phone started buzzing. He picked it up, looked at the screen, and sighed. Then she hit the speaker button. It was my mom. "We need to talk to Michelle," she said. Her voice had that sharp edge it always did when she thought she was about to win an argument. Grandma said calmly, "She's right here." There was a pause. Then my mom said, "Look, we know she's upset, but she's overreacting. Nobody meant to hurt her feelings. And this stunt with the card? That's really unfair. She's making things difficult for everyone." I didn't move. Grandpa put his mug down and leaned forward. "The only thing unfair is how you've been treating her. Don't call this house again unless it's to apologize." Then he ended the call. No one spoke for a while. The movie kept playing in the background and Grandma got up to refill my cocoa like nothing had happened. My uncle texted me a little later, saying he'd heard what went down and that I'd done the right thing. For once I believed him. But the next evening, just as we were finishing dinner, there was a knock at the door. Grandpa went to open it. I heard my mom's voice before I even saw her. "Enough is enough, Dad. We came to talk some sense into her." Behind her stood my dad, arms crossed, and my sister holding her youngest on her hip. They didn't even look embarrassed, just inconvenienced. I stood up, but Grandpa gestured for me to stay seated. They came in uninvited, dripping snow onto the rug. My mom started with, "You can't just leave family over a misunderstanding. Everyone thinks you've lost your mind. You owe us an apology, Michelle." My sister jumped in right after, saying, "And you're seriously not going to help with the kids before we go on our trip next week? You know we can't afford a sitter right now." That's when Grandpa had enough. He stepped forward and said, "You've got 5 seconds to get out of my house." My dad opened his mouth, probably to argue, but Grandpa started counting. 5. My mom blinked at him like he was bluffing. 4. My sister took a step back. 3. My dad muttered something about me being ungrateful. 2. No one moved. 1. Then the door slammed. Grandpa locked it, turned around, and said, "Let's not let that ruin dessert." Grandma brought out the pie. My cousins came over later that night. We laughed until almost midnight, the fire crackling, the snow falling outside. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the family disappointment. I felt free. But the next morning, a neighbor would send me something that would make my blood boil. And that's when everything truly changed. The video came in just after 8 in the morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Grandma, slowly picking at a piece of toast, still in my pajamas. Grandpa had gone out to salt the driveway. I wasn't expecting anything. Christmas had passed, the family drama seemed to have quieted down, and I was starting to feel like I could actually breathe again. The message was from Rosa, our old neighbor. We weren't close, but she always smiled at me when I took the trash out or brought in groceries. The text just said, "Figured you'd want to see this. They've lost it." I tapped the video and turned up the volume. It opened with the familiar view of our front yard, only now it was covered in a thin layer of dirty snow. My dad was dragging a suitcase down the steps. Then came the black trash bags. 2. Then 3. My mom followed behind, tossing a plastic tub onto the pile like it was nothing. My sister stood at the doorway, arms folded, phone in one hand, watching like she was supervising. Then I heard it, my mom's voice, loud and clear. "She wants to live without us, let her live without us." Then my dad, "We don't care about her anymore." And my sister, laughing, "Make sure you throw the whole thing. She's not coming back for this crap." I stared at the screen. The video was barely a minute long, but by the time it ended I felt like something inside me had shattered. Not because they threw my stuff out, I'd already grieved that family. But because even after all the years I tried, the years I helped them, paid for them, raised my sister's kids for free, they had no hesitation turning on me like I was a stranger. I showed the video to Grandma without saying a word. He watched the whole thing. Didn't ask a question. Just walked to the back door and called for Grandpa. 20 minutes later we were in the truck. The roads were icy and the sky looked like it might snow again, but I didn't care. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just stared out the window as the miles passed. When we pulled up to the house, my stuff was still there. Some of it torn open, my books scattered across the yard like trash. My winter coat half buried in slush. A framed photo of me at graduation. Broken glass cracked right across my face. I didn't even go to the door. I walked into the yard and started picking up the bags. A moment later, the front door opened. My mom stood there with a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked annoyed. My dad appeared behind her, grinning. Well, look who came crawling back, he said. I turned. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I said, I'm here for my things. That's it. My sister leaned out from behind the door. You're lucky we didn't burn it. That was it. That was the moment something in me closed for good. I dropped the bag I was holding and walked straight up to the steps. You're dead to me, I said. My mom scoffed. Don't be dramatic. No, I'm serious. Don't ever call me again. Don't text. Don't ask me for money or favors or anything. From this point on, you don't exist. My dad rolled his eyes and said something like, you'll be back when you need something. I didn't answer. I turned, finished loading the truck with Grandpa, and we drove off. The entire ride home was silent. Not awkward. Just done. It felt like the final page in a book I never wanted to read again. When we got back, Grandma helped me unpack everything in the guest room. Some things were ruined. One of the trash bags had a rip and water had soaked through some of my notebooks. But I kept them. Just as a reminder. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my grandparents drinking tea. Grandma was working on a puzzle. Grandpa had on a ball game in the background. It was peaceful. Safe. And even though I hadn't planned any of this, even though I had no apartment, no savings to speak of, and no clue what was next, for the first time in years I didn't feel small. I felt free. And 4 days later, on January 4th, something happened that would flip everything again. But this time, in the best way. I hadn't realized how much I'd been bracing for another hit until the quiet started to feel suspicious. No more calls. No texts. No passive-aggressive voicemails. Nothing. After the stunt they pulled, I expected another explosion. But days passed and it was like they vanished. So I couldn't relax. So on the morning of January 4th, I woke up before the sun, wide awake with nowhere to be. I sat on the edge of the bed in the guest room staring at the wall and just said out loud, enough. I opened my laptop and started applying to jobs like it was the only thing I had to do on earth. I didn't care if it was boring, physical, repetitive, or weird. I needed income, independence, and something to pull me out of the quicksand I'd been stuck in. One job stood out. It wasn't glamorous, but something about it clicked. A small local property management company needed a part-time office assistant. No college degree required. Paid weekly. Organized chaos. That's our style, the listing said. I sent my resume. An hour later, I got a response asking if I could come in that afternoon. The office was tucked between a nail salon and an insurance agency. The owner, Laura, looked like she'd been up since the 90s. Frizzy bun, 3 coffees deep, fast talker. Within 15 minutes, she'd asked about my experience with spreadsheets, difficult tenants, and whether I could handle a ringing phone while filing. I said yes to everything. She handed me a W-4 and said, "You start tomorrow." I walked out holding a folder with paperwork, stunned. I hadn't told my grandparents I was even interviewing. When I got home and showed them the job offer, Grandma made hot chocolate and said, "Knew it. Told him you'd land on your feet." Grandpa grinned and said, "First win of the year, kid." It was a small job, but it felt like the first real thing I had done for myself in ages. What I didn't expect was what came 2 days later. It was lunchtime and I was sitting in the cramped break room, eating a peanut butter sandwich when Laura came in, scrolled through her phone and said, "Weird question, but, you looking for a place to stay?" I looked up mid-bite. She explained her aunt had just moved into assisted living and left behind a small guest house on her property. A converted garage with its own entrance, kitchenette, and bathroom. "It's sitting empty. Rent's dirt cheap and you seem like someone who needs a reset," she added. She texted me the address. I went to see it after work. It wasn't fancy, wood paneling, an old futon, and a space heater that looked like it came with a warning label. But it was mine. Or it could be mine. The first space in years that wouldn't be shared with crying children or the constant echo of guilt. I told Grandma and Grandpa that night. They were supportive immediately, even though Grandma got misty-eyed. Grandpa said, "We'll help you fix it up. But don't rush. You've got a home here as long as you need." It was the first time I thought, I might actually be okay. But just as things were settling, something weird started happening. My uncle dropped by that weekend. We sat on the porch while Grandpa grilled in the back. He leaned in and said, "So your mom's been calling people? Telling stories? Real ones?" I frowned. "What kind of stories?" "She told Aunt Dana you were mentally unstable. That you were having episodes." I laughed. Thought he was joking. "She told Cousin Ruth you stole from them. Said that's why they threw you out. Not because of a family fight, but because you were taking money and lying about it." I stared at him. "She's rewriting the whole thing," he said. "And she's not being quiet about it. She wants people on her side." I should have been furious, but honestly I just felt tired. "I don't think she's finished," my uncle said. "Just be careful." Thanked him. And I believed him. Because the next night I got a message that changed everything. Not from my parents. From a bank. Apparently, my mom had tried to access my old account. One I hadn't used in months, and she wasn't on it. I got a security alert. Unusual login attempt blocked. That's when I realized, this wasn't just about pride. They weren't angry. They were desperate. And they were planning something. The email came through at 10:14 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember because I was getting ready for bed, already in pajamas, half asleep, when my phone lit up. Unusual login attempt blocked. If this wasn't you, please secure your account immediately. It was from my old bank. The account I hadn't touched in months. The one I'd emptied right before leaving my parents' house. It had maybe $7 left in it. Nobody else should have had access to it. But my mom used to have the login saved on her tablet. I stared at the screen for a good minute, toothbrush in hand, foam gathering at the corners of my mouth before it sank in. She wasn't done. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. They weren't angry that I left. They were panicking because I was gone. Because the person who did all the quiet labor, paying bills, cooking, cleaning, babysitting, had stopped existing in their world. I changed all my passwords that night. Not just the bank, but everything: email, credit app, social media. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From exhaustion. The next morning I went to work like nothing happened. I filed leases, printed invoices, answered calls. But under the calm surface my thoughts kept circling back. What were they planning? 2 days later I found out. My cousin Ellie texted me a screenshot from Facebook. It was my mom's post. A picture of their front porch decorated for winter, the caption reading, "Some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. But family always forgives." Eventually. There were hundreds of comments. Her friends said things like, "You raised her right, don't blame yourself and she'll come around." My sister commented with a laughing emoji and wrote, "She's learning the hard way." It wasn't even anger I felt. Just that hollow numbness when you realize someone's rewriting the story of your life in public, and half the audience is nodding along. The next morning my uncle came by for coffee. He told me my mom had been calling relatives saying I'd lost it. That I'd stolen money and lashed out. According to her version, they'd had no choice but to remove me from the house. I didn't even know what to say. But then something strange happened. Something they didn't see coming. People started calling me. An old neighbor messaged saying she'd seen how I used to take care of the house, the kids, everything, that nobody believed my mom's story. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent a long message saying she'd always known they treated me differently. Even my mom's own brother texted, "You're better off, Michelle. Don't look back." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was brewing. Then late Saturday night I got another message from Rosa, the neighbor who had filmed the first video of them throwing out my stuff. She wrote, "You might want this too. I didn't send the whole thing last time." I hesitated for a second before tapping the file. It was longer this time, maybe 4 minutes. The first part was what I'd already seen. My dad tossing out my things, my mom complaining about how ungrateful I was. But when the camera kept rolling, the tone shifted. My dad said, "She won't last long without us. She's too soft." My mom laughed. "Give her a month. She'll come crawling back." Then my sister's voice, colder than I remembered. "Either she comes back or she disappears. Either way, problem solved." Rosa must have zoomed in because I could see their faces clearly. Firking. Relax. Like they were discussing the weather. I watched it 3 times. Then I saved it in 3 different places. My laptop, a flash drive, and the cloud. When I looked up, Grandma was standing in the doorway. She didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "If they show up here again, I'll be the one to answer the door." I didn't know how soon that would matter. Because less than 24 hours later, they did show up. Unannounced. Angry. And not just to talk. It was one of those quiet winter Sundays where everything feels paused. Grandma was baking banana bread, the entire house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, and Grandpa was in the garage tinkering with something that probably didn't need fixing. I was on the couch, scrolling through listings for used furniture, planning what I'd do with the guest house once I moved in. It felt safe. Like real life was finally beginning to show up again after all the mess. I hadn't thought about my parents or my sister all morning. It was becoming easier, not forgetting but letting go. Then came the knock. 3 sharp bangs on the front door. No doorbell. No text. Just that demanding kind of knock that said they still thought they had the right to show up. I looked at Grandma. She froze, holding a dish towel, her face already knowing. I peeked out the window. There they were. My dad stood with his arms folded, pacing in front of the porch like he was the one waiting on someone else. My mom was holding her phone and a coffee cup, scanning the house like she expected someone to come crawling out. My sister leaned against the porch post in a designer hoodie, chewing gum and scrolling her phone. Her kids were in the backseat of the SUV. Unsupervised again. I stepped back from the window and said, "They brought the circus." Grandma didn't say a word. She walked back into the kitchen and picked up the bread pan like nothing happened. But Grandpa had heard the knock too. A minute later he was opening the door. He didn't invite them in. Just stood there blocking the entrance. I stayed out of view listening. My mom was the first to speak. "We need to talk to Michelle. It's time to let all this go. We're family and what happened was unfortunate. But we can't keep holding grudges. She needs to help out." Then my sister chimed in like this was some group meeting. "Yeah, we leave Friday. We've got tickets to Aruba. All she has to do is watch the kids." That's not a huge ask. She really said that. Like I hadn't just cut them off for dumping my life into the snow. Like none of it ever happened. Like I was some employee returning to a shift I forgot I was scheduled for. Grandpa's voice was low but firm. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here like this. You think after everything you said, everything you did, Michelle's going to babysit your kids again?" My dad started stepping forward but Grandpa moved an inch closer. He said, "Turn around and leave." My mom scoffed. "You're letting her manipulate you. We're just asking for a little support. She's still part of this family." "No, she's not," Grandpa said. "Not yours anyway. Now get off my property before I call the cops." My sister muttered something under her breath and walked toward the car. My dad shook his head like he was disappointed in us. And my mom? She looked directly at the doorway, probably hoping I was standing behind it. She said, "She'll come around. She always does." Then they got in the SUV and drove off, tires spitting snow as they peeled out. When Grandpa came back inside he just shrugged and said, "Like cockroaches. They only show up where they think they can take something." I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. We ate banana bread and Grandma flipped on one of her detective shows. At some point she looked over at me and said, "They're going to keep trying. That kind of entitlement doesn't die overnight. But you're stronger now. They can't touch you anymore." He was right. Later that night I emailed Laura and said I'd take the guest house by February 1st. She wrote back within the hour, "It's all yours." Grandpa offered to drive over next weekend to help patch the roof and fix the broken cabinet under the sink. Grandma already started packing kitchen towels and some old plates she insisted I take. It didn't feel like running away. It felt like arriving. I kept Rose's video. Not because I wanted revenge, but because it reminded me how far I'd come. They could lie, twist stories, play the victim all they wanted. Let them. I was done playing along. And for the first time in a long time I didn't just have an escape. I had a beginning. The following weekend Grandpa and I drove over to the guest house with a toolbox and a bag of snacks Grandma packed, just in case. We spent the whole afternoon patching a leak in the corner of the roof and tightening the door hinges. It wasn't glamorous. The space was small and smelled faintly of paint and dust. But it was mine. When we were done we sat on the front step sharing a sandwich and Grandpa handed me a spare key he'd quietly made at the hardware store without telling me. "It's not much," he said, "but it's a start." And it was. It was the first place I'd ever have that wasn't borrowed, conditional, or weighed down by guilt. When we pulled into the driveway back home, Grandma was standing at the door with 2 boxes already labeled, "Michelle's Kitchen." She didn't say anything. She just smiled.